Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about Joe Biden. Joe Biden loves to say that he listens to the scientists, which means that he cherry picks a few academics who will say things that support his agenda. Spiked magazine had a good article about this back in August, the left's shameful abuse of the science. When Democrats say they're the party of science, what they really mean is don't question us. Many on the left today peddle the narrative that they are more scientifically minded than those on the right. They market themselves as the heirs to the ideals of the Enlightenment, reason, progress, and truth, while pillaring the right as a collection of creationists, climate change deniers, and anti-vaxxers. This narrative is false and increasingly so. It's a useful fiction, however. It allows the left to dress up its moral and political views as scientific. To question them, therefore, is to question the authority of the science. It's tantamount to secular heresy. When the Democrats in the U.S. present themselves as the party of science, they're really saying, do not question us. Nobody embodies the authority of junk science more than Michael Mann, who's now Joe Biden's climate advisor. Let's review how Michael Mann got famous. These graphs are from the 1990 United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. What the top graph shows is Earth's approximate temperature starting 12,000 years ago and then moving forwards to the present. You can see that Earth was warmest about 6,000 years ago and it's been cooling generally ever since. And the bottom graph shows Earth's approximate temperature over the past 1,000 years or so. You can see that the warmest period was around the year 1200. The general idea of these graphs is that Earth is not particularly warm now and was much warmer in the past. Here's some of the discussion from that report. There is growing evidence that worldwide temperatures were higher than at present during the mid-Holocene, especially 5,000 to 6,000 years before the present, though carbon dioxide levels appear to have been quite similar to those of the pre-industrial era. Parts of Western Europe, China, Japan, and the eastern USA were a few degrees warmer in July during the mid-Holocene than in recent decades. And then the late 10th to early 13th centuries, about AD 950 to 1250, appear to have been exceptionally warm in Western Europe, Iceland, and Greenland. This period is known as the medieval climatic optimum. This period of widespread warmth is notable in that there is no evidence that it was accompanied by an increase of greenhouse gases. Cooler episodes have been associated with glacial advances in alpine regions of the world. Such neoglacial episodes have been increasingly common in the last few thousand years. Of particular interest is the most recent cold event, the Little Ice Age, which resulted in extensive glacial advances in almost all alpine regions of the world between 150 and 450 years ago. Glaciers were more extensive 100 to 200 years ago than now nearly everywhere. So the important takeaway from the 1990 IPCC report is that Earth was much warmer in the past and that it had nothing to do with the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The information contained in the 1990 IPCC report was pretty devastating for climate alarmists. There is lots of scientific literature showing that Earth was much warmer 6,000 years ago than it is now. Scientists have determined that there was less ice in the Arctic Ocean around the time Stonehenge was built and that it may in fact have been periodically ice-free. This happened in spite of the fact that carbon dioxide levels were very low and shows us that carbon dioxide does not control the amount of ice in the Arctic Ocean. It also shows us that polar bears can survive an ice-free Arctic because polar bears have been around a lot longer than 6,000 years. Scientists have known for a long time that Earth had fewer glaciers during the Middle Ages and that in fact Europe may have been ice-free at that time. After the Middle Ages, during the Little Ice Age, glaciers became much more extensive around the world. And since the end of the Little Ice Age, there's been a large amount of glacial retreat. Alaska's largest glacier at Glacier Bay retreated more than 50 miles between 1794 and 1879. Glaciers have been retreating and advancing for a long time during periods when carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were fairly stable. The reality of science completely destroys the narrative of climate alarmists. So climate alarmists had to rewrite history in order to support their political agenda. In 2006, Dr. David Deming of the University of Oklahoma testified to the U.S. Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. He told the committee that around 1995, a major researcher in the area of climate change said to him, "We have to get rid of the medieval warm period." The medieval warm period was a time of unusually warm weather that began around 1000 AD and persisted until a cold period known as the Little Ice Age took hold in the 14th century. Warmer climate brought a remarkable flowering of prosperity, knowledge, and art to Europe during the High Middle Ages. The existence of the medieval warm period had been recognized in the scientific literature for decades, but now is a major embarrassment to those maintaining that the 20th century warming was truly anomalous. It had to be gotten rid of. And this is where Michael Mann comes into the picture. In his famous hockey stick graph, he erased both the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age. He demonstrated that he could produce the fake scientific results which politicians demanded. In this graph, I overlaid the 1990 IPCC graph in red on top of Mann's hockey stick in blue and black. You can see how Mann made the medieval warm period disappear. He made the Little Ice Age disappear, and he added on this hockey stick of skyrocketing temperatures at the end. Michael Mann gave global warming alarmists, and in particular Vice President Al Gore, the propaganda they needed to push their agenda forward. And as a result of his fraudulent efforts, he's now being rewarded by Joe Biden as being his chief climate advisor. I'm going to finish this video up by looking at some of the scientific implications of Mann's hockey stick graph. Let's pretend for a minute that the graph is accurate. According to Michael Mann's hockey stick, temperatures started skyrocketing at 299 parts per million CO2 and have been rising very quickly ever since. If this was accurate, it would imply that any time carbon dioxide levels were above 298 parts per million, temperatures are going to be rising really quickly. Yet we know this can't be true because for almost all of the past 600 million years, carbon dioxide levels have been well above 298 parts per million. And another implication of this graph is that in order to stop warming, we would have to get CO2 levels back below 299 parts per million, which nobody believes is possible. We know that temperatures were much warmer 6,000 years ago when carbon dioxide levels were well below 298 parts per million. The bottom line is that Michael Mann is a complete fraud, which is why he's so popular with Democrats and with the press. He has generated lots of money and lots of political power by erasing Earth's history and replacing it with a fraudulent hockey stick graph. Toto and Curie have been pulling back the curtain on this sort of junk science for well over a decade. You can visit them on the web at realclimatescience.com.